Ayrton Senna, Imola, 1994. On May 1st, 1994, the entire world held its breath watching the San Marino Grand Prix at Imola, Italy. On the starting grid, Ayrton Senna, the icon of speed, the pride of Brazil, sat in his blue and yellow Williams FW16, eyes fixed on the track ahead. Among the millions watching, no one knew that just a few laps later, this legend would leave the world forever. Senna, with the instincts of a warrior, could not walk away. He wanted to race, he wanted to win, he wanted to fight. The car screamed forward at unimaginable speeds. By the 7th lap, Senna was leading the race. The crowd roared, but inside the cramped cockpit, he felt something was wrong. The Williams FW16 had already been plagued with instability and handling issues, especially at high speeds. Then came the fateful moment at Tamburello. A high-speed corner with no escape road, just an unforgiving concrete wall. Senna entered at over 300 km/h, and suddenly disaster struck. The car lost control, its tires failing to grip. In an instant, the FW16 went straight, like a steel arrow with no brakes, and slammed into the wall. The impact echoed like thunder, metal crumpling, concrete shaking. The front of the car exploded, wheels torn off, debris scattering across the track. Thousands of spectators froze in horror. Inside the cockpit, a broken suspension arm pierced forward like a blade. A piece of metal struck Senna's helmet, tearing into the right side of his skull. Blood gushed instantly, soaking his white and blue racing suit. His body slumped, his head tilted helplessly. Medical crews rushed in, cutting the seatbelts, trying desperately to revive him. A rescue helicopter landed directly on the track. The entire world watched on television, holding their breath. But the injuries were catastrophic. Part of his skull was fractured, his brain fatally damaged. Senna was flown to Maggiore Hospital in Bologna. But within 2 hours, the news spread like wildfire. Ayrton Senna was dead at the age of 34. His death was not only a personal tragedy, but a global shock. In Brazil, millions mourned. His funeral was a national event, attended by crowds that lined the streets to say goodbye to their hero. The image of the Williams FW16 smashing into the Tamburello wall remains haunting, not just because of the brutality of the crash, but because it ended the life of one of the greatest drivers of all time. Many would later say that Senna didn't just die because of the impact, but because he loved speed too much, because he trusted his own limits too deeply. Roland Ratzenberger, Imola, 1994. On April 30th, 1994, just one day before the shocking death of Ayrton Senna, the Imola circuit had already witnessed another tragedy. Roland Ratzenberger, a 33-year-old Austrian driver who had only just begun his Formula One career, lost his life in a horrific crash during qualifying. Roland was not a household name in F1 at the time. He did not carry the glory of Senna or Schumacher, nor was he the subject of major expectations. But Roland was a silent fighter. He had spent years racing in smaller series, from Japan to Europe, before finally earning a seat with the SimTech team for the 1994 season. For him, simply standing on the F1 grid was already a dream come true. That dream, however, ended brutally and far too soon. During qualifying at Imola, Roland pushed as hard as he could to secure a decent position. On a previous lap, his car had suffered damage to the front wing after a minor incident. By all logic, he should have returned to the pits to have it checked. But driven by his hunger to prove himself, Roland pressed on, charging at full speed. As his SimTech approached the Villeneuve corner at nearly 300 km/h, disaster struck. The weakened front wing failed completely, tearing off. With no downforce to keep the car on the track, it skated forward like an out-of-control bullet. In an instant, it slammed head-on into the concrete wall. The sound of the impact thundered through the circuit. The car was torn apart, debris scattering across the track. The violent force smashed directly into Roland's body. His head struck with devastating impact, causing massive cranial trauma. Blood seeped through his helmet almost instantly. The medical team rushed to him, but it was too late. Roland was gone almost the moment of impact. Spectators on the grandstands were stunned. Before they could even process what had happened, the giant screen showed the shattered SimTech and the Austrian driver lying motionless. There were no cheers, no shouts, only a heavy silence blanketing the entire circuit. Roland's death may not have shaken the world as Senna's would the following day, but it was the grim warning. It proved that Imola in 1994 was a death trap, that high-speed corners and weak safety standards had turned the race into a nightmare. Jules Bianchi, Suzuka 2014. On October 5, 2014, the Suzuka circuit in Japan became the stage of one of the most haunting accidents in modern F1 history. Jules Bianchi, a 25-year-old French driver seen as the future of Ferrari, met his fate under heavy rain at the Japanese Grand Prix. From the very first laps, the weather was an enemy. Torrential rain reduced visibility to nearly zero, the track slick, tires struggling for grip. Yet the race continued. Inside the cockpit, Bianchi focused intensely, fighting to keep his underpowered Marussia competitive among the roaring beasts of speed. By lap 43, disaster unfolded. Earlier, another car had crashed and come to a stop at the side of the track. Race control sent a recovery vehicle, a tractor crane, onto the circuit to clear it. Instead of stopping the race with a red flag, they waved only yellow flags to signal caution. Cars were still flying past at over 200 km/h in blinding sheets of rain. As Jules Bianchi pushed through the Dunlop curve, his car suddenly lost control. It skidded off the wet grass, unable to slow. In a horrifying instant, the Marussia slammed directly into the side of the recovery crane. The impact was catastrophic, with a force equivalent to falling from a 20-story building. The car was mangled almost beyond recognition, its nose crushed beneath the massive machine. Inside the cockpit, Bianchi's head absorbed the brunt of the crash, causing devastating brain trauma. Medical crews rushed in, but the downpour made rescue efforts chaotic. Bianchi was pulled from the wreck unconscious, his helmet bloodied, his body limp. He was rushed immediately to a nearby hospital and underwent hours of emergency surgery. News spread rapidly through the F1 world. Drivers were stunned, fans prayed for a miracle. But the injuries were too severe. Jules Bianchi slipped into a deep coma. 9 months later, on July 17, 2015, he drew his final breath at a hospital in Nice, France. Formula One had lost another star, not on the racetrack itself, but in a hospital bed. His death was not just a personal tragedy, but a shockwave through the sport. Tom Price, South African Grand Prix 1977. On March 5, 1977, the Kyalami circuit in South Africa witnessed one of the most horrifying accidents in the entire history of Formula One. Tom Price, a 27-year-old Welsh driver, lost his life in a moment so sudden that no one could believe it had happened. On lap 22, Tom's teammate Renzo Zorzi, also driving for Shadow, suffered an engine fire on the side of the track. Zorzi managed to pull over and escape, but flames still erupted from the car. Two young marshals rushed to respond, carrying heavy fire extinguishers across the track. But instead of waiting for clearance, they sprinted straight into the path of oncoming cars traveling at over 270 km/h. It was a fatal mistake. Hans-Joachim Stuck's car, approaching first, narrowly swerved and avoided one of the marshals. But right behind him was Tom Price, charging at full speed. His vision blocked by Stuck's car, he had no chance to react. The second marshal, still holding his extinguisher, stepped directly into Price's path. The collision was instantaneous. Price's shadow struck the marshal at full force, killing him instantly, his body flung violently aside. But the horror did not end there. The fire extinguisher, weighing nearly 20 kilograms, was catapulted forward by the impact and smashed directly into Price's helmet. The extinguisher obliterated his helmet, delivering fatal head injuries and killing him instantly. His car, with no control, continued for several hundred meters before crashing into the barriers. When it finally stopped, Tom Price was already gone. The accident happened so quickly that few even understood what they had just seen. In a matter of seconds, both a driver and a track marshal had been killed. Blood, debris, and chaos turned Kyalami into a nightmare. Tom Price died at just 27 years old, with his career and talent still on the rise. His death terrified his fellow drivers and contributed to urgent calls for stronger safety measures for both drivers and trackside workers. Conclusion: the haunting deaths of Senna, Ratzenberger, Bianchi, and Price remind us that speed always comes with a price. Each tragedy forced Formula One to change, from barriers and runoff zones to the halo system. Safety is never given. It is built on the blood and lives of those who fell. And the final lesson? Glory only matters when it is protected by safety.